Thanks, Akil, for hosting us today. This is awesome. And thanks to everyone who helped set up the venues and everything. This is an awesome event so far. So today, I'm going to talk about staking on Ethereum and the UX and why that's critical to decentralization. My name is Colfax. I spend a lot of time with the ETH staker community, which is a community around staking on Ethereum. I'm also very passionate about empowering open source developers and how we can help support development of public goods. I work on that with another project called Gitpo app. First, I'll talk about, just for a second, what it means to be decentralized. So the definition of decentralized is to move the control of an organization or government from a single place to several smaller ones. So really, when you think about it, that's kind of why we're all here with Ethereum. We want to build this sort of decentralized network that we can actually use to do different things. And staking really is at the core of that. And if we don't properly decentralize staking, then we're really not building as robust of a network as we should be. There are many areas of possible centralization in the Ethereum network, especially for stakers, one of which is like miners and node operators, so who's actually running the software. Another one is the software client that you're using. So depending on what software you're running, if there's an issue with that, that could be another area of centralization. Hardware, cloud provider, geography, there's many different ways and layers in the stack where we can introduce centralization. And the UX of staking actually impacts a lot how much centralization gets introduced at each different layer. So there are, as I mentioned, many different ways of staking. This is the Ethereum.org staking resources page built by a bunch of the people up here in the front end, or in the front row. A lot of amazing resources here. And as you can see, the #1 sort of gold standard for staking is solo home staking. And what that really means is you actually running software on a machine, like in your house, and you're able to, that way, distribute the network even further, as opposed to doing something like, say, sending your ETH to a central provider or doing something like that. So I highly encourage you to take a look at this website and look at all the different resources for the different ways to stake. And I'm going to talk a little bit about solo home staking and why that is the premier way to stake, and sort of what the UX is like and how we need to improve it. So in terms of node operator centralization, you can see here that there's a whole lot of centralization around who actually runs nodes in the network, and that is a problem. And one of the reasons why that is the case is because the UX of staking needs to be improved, and the easiest thing to do is basically just to send your ETH to somebody else, and they stake for you, but then you're actually giving them a lot of power. There's a few barriers to node operation, one of which is the hardware barrier. And hardware in proof of work, which is where we're at now, is very high. But migrating to proof of stake, the hardware barrier actually goes down from practically an entire data center to something you can run on as small as a Raspberry Pi. Of course, a banana for scale, so you can tell the difference. The monetary barrier is still relatively high. Previously, the primary cost is hardware and electricity. Now in staking, the monetary barrier is going to be ETH, but there's a lot of smart people that are working on that in a decentralized way. I'm going to focus primarily talking about the technical barrier. Now, the technical barrier to staking is still relatively high, but there's a lot of work going into building tools that make the UX of setting up your validator at home a whole lot easier. And the Ethereum.org group is doing a great job of bringing a lot of those resources out there, as well as the eStaker community. So now in the early days, it was even harder than it is now. And you basically would have to like go directly to forums and ask questions. There weren't a whole lot of resources, let alone like unified glossaries across languages. And we're getting to a point where you're actually able to set up nodes and stuff at home with some assisted infrastructure. But we still need to clearly improve the UX of staking, as you can tell by the charts earlier, because a lot of people are still giving their ETH to these centralized staking providers. So within the Ethereum.org staking resources page, there's a subsection on solo staking. And there's a ton of resources here for how you can properly solo stake and how you can basically set up your node on basically in your home, different hardware resources. I highly encourage you to check this out. And if you have any suggestions for this, the team is super receptive. If you have any other tools that you know that are available to make this easier, I'm sure we can get those added. It's also open source, so you can send a pull request to add those in there. But there's a ton of good information in here. And the last thing that we really need to do is continue to chip away at making solo staking an even better UX. And so we have a lot of effort at the ETHstaker group of facilitating people that care about the UX of staking and developing more open source tools around it. And so we're actually, I don't want to chill too much, but this is but it's an amazing group of open source developers and people, a couple people here in the room that are working on the decentralization of the Ethereum network, all basically just for fun, a bunch of internet friends. We're doing a staking gathering later this week, and on Thursday we have a hackathon around the UX of staking. So if this is something that you care about, and if you want to contribute, or even if you just want to test out some of the tools and you can let us know if the UX is good or not, I encourage you to come by. There are still some tickets available for the hackathon, I think for the main conference as well. But yeah, go to ETHstaker. Also, my name is Colfax. I'm Colfax Shelby on Twitter, COLFAXSELBY. If you don't have a ticket and if you really want to come, just hit me up and I'll see what I could do. Thank you.
Do you really think even if you improve the UX for at-home staking, people will move away from Lido, Rocket Fuel, etc.? Or is it that like Web 2, Web 3 conflict as well, where that marginal headache of not having to manage your own services is probably just too much of a burden for individuals?
That's a good question. That's a good question, and I honestly think it's an education problem. I think that it's very easy to use something like Lido or where you basically just insert your ETH, and people don't realize how bad that is for the network. And so I think what we need to do is we need to get solo staking to be as close to that easy as possible. And we also need to educate people on how this is like 100 times better for the network, so that like the small incremental effort, so maybe it's like 10% more difficult, but it's like 100 times better for the network, then that'll actually get people to change. But I think we're quite a ways away from there, because I think most people just look at staking ETH as like a way to earn yield, and they don't understand that it actually is like very integral to how the network works.
Hey.